be with you, brothers and sisters, friends. As-Siddiq welcomes you once again to his monthly Tafseer program by Shaykh Raouf Zaman, Imam of MCMC Masjid, Scottsdale, New Jersey. This year's theme is, to remind you, the Day of Judgment and Beyond. And tonight's major topic is the major signs, inshallah. Again, please feel free at any time to post your questions as well as answers to any questions the Imam may ask. Without further ado, Shaykh Raouf.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, once again we are here to look at this topic of the hereafter and the day of judgment and what is beyond it actually. Let me start with the praise of Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So we have approximately an hour ahead of us, so relax inshallah. Grab your cup as we usually do, whether it's coffee or tea or any other drink to keep you calm and relaxed during this session, inshallah, and paying attention. And as Imtiaz said, if any question comes to mind, then don't hesitate to put it up. You may forget it if you delay. So be quick in putting up your questions. And let us have a lively session, inshallah. Now, last month we talked about minor signs of the Day of Judgment. Of course, just a reminder that there are too many of them for us to speak about all of them individually. We mentioned some of them and perhaps discussed a few of them. And that sets the tone for what we're going to discuss today, the major signs. I have slides, and I hope this is going to be shared with you, inshallah. Now, the first point I want to mention here, before actually going into the major signs, is that belief in the Day of Judgment is an article of faith for us, Arkan al-Iman. So it's an important aspect of our belief. In fact, it's an important aspect of our being as Muslims. And we have to understand our Iman, all of the articles of Iman very clearly. And this is one of the reasons why we study it. It is important in order to motivate us also to take the correct steps and the correct actions to realize what we want to achieve in the hereafter, inshallah. As previously mentioned, the actual day or date is not known, and just as the day or date of our deaths is not known. These are two things that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has kept to Himself. The day of or the time of the day of judgment, when exactly it will occur, what's the date, and when our deaths will occur, these two things. And Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has kept away that knowledge from us for good reasons. And since we had discussed it or mentioned this fact on several occasions, perhaps by now you should be able to think of reasons why this is so. Why did Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala keep this knowledge away from us? Instead of telling us of the exact time, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has given us signs, both minor and major signs that point to its coming. So whenever any one of these signs is realized in actuality, we know that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and His Prophet are speaking the truth. And we know that the day of judgment is coming closer and closer and closer. So that is an important reason, you may say, for us to uh, know the signs. But why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep away from us the actual knowledge of the hour? That's a question that perhaps you can think of and answer as we go along, inshallah. So we discuss some of the minor signs. So let's go now into the major signs. I'll just list the ones that we have that many of the scholars mention. And of course, they mention it from what is mentioned in hadith, a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, hadith is singular, ahadith is a plural in Arabic. We can say hadith actually also to refer to the plural, more than one hadith. So in the ahadith or hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the major signs are mentioned, and they're clearly mentioned as major signs. So here is a list of them. The appearance of the Mahdi. 2. The emergence of Al-Masih al-Dajjal, the Antichrist. 3. The descent of Isa alayhi salam. 4. The emergence of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. 5. Destruction of the Kaaba. 6. The smoke. 7. And that smoke will engulf the entire world. 7. Rising of the sun from the west. 8. Emergence of a beast from the earth that will speak to the people. 9. 3 earthquakes. 10. Blowing of a cold wind. And 11. Emergence of a fire. So this is it in brief. So if we don't get to cover all of them or all of them adequately, at least you'll have a list of them. Perhaps you're aware of all of them or some of them, and perhaps you may have questions about some of them, and you can start formulating those questions in your mind. Maybe some of them will be answered, and if not, then you can put your question forward. But again, before talking about the signs themselves, uh, the question is, what is the sequence of these events? In what sequence will they occur? While we have this list of 11 that you see here, the scholars are not agreed that this is the sequence in which they will occur. This is just taken from what some scholars say, so the list is not necessarily in its proper sequence. While the major signs, as I mentioned, are mentioned in a number of hadith, but they're not mentioned all in the same order. In every hadith, you don't find the exact same order. Otherwise, we would probably be certain that that's the order in which they will occur, the sequence in which they will occur. But since in the hadith, the sequence differs, how they are mentioned, or the order in which they are mentioned, it is an indication that we don't know the full order, the exact order or sequence in which they will occur. Also, scholars point out that in these ahadith, the conjunction wa is used, which is and this does not indicate sequence. So, for example, if I say Zaid and Omar came, did they come together or did they come separately? And if they came separately, who came before whom? None of that is known from a statement like that. Zaid and Omar came. Ja'a Zaidun wa Omar wa. The word wa is used. There's no sequence mentioned. However, in Arabic, you have ways of indicating the sequence. So you can say together, they came together, and that will clear up the matter. Or if Zaid came before Omar, you can say Ja'a Zaidun fa Omar. Fa instead of wa. Fa Omar, that means immediately after after Zaid, Omar came. Or you can say Ja'a Zaidun thumma Omar. Zaid came, then Omar, which means that after some time, then Omar came. It's not immediately after, whereas the fa indicates immediately after. So the wa is used in these ahadith showing well, actually not indicating sequence. So they can be together or they can come one after the other, and we don't know in what sequence. Yeah, although I may say, Zaidun wa Omar, Zaid and Omar came, there's no sequence that is mentioned here, and therefore it is possible that Zaid came before Omar or Omar came before Zaid. So scholars have tried to put the sequence together, but they do not agree on that. But what they do agree on is that the last one is the emergence of a fire. And you'll see when we talk about that, inshallah, why this fire, all are agreed that it will be the last sign. Some scholars have divided the signs into earthly signs and heavenly signs. According to Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, and he's the most famous commentator on the Ahadith of al-Bukhari, the book Sahih al-Bukhari, he said the first of the earthly signs is the appearance of the Dajjal, and the first of the heavenly ones is the rising of the sun from the west. What he means by earthly signs are what will take place on earth, and the heavenly ones are what will take place in the heavens. So the appearance of Dajjal on earth, that is the first of the earthly signs, according to him, and the first of the heavenly ones, the rising of the sun from the west. Another scholar divides them into those that are close to the hour, the first of which is the Dajjal, and those that show the actual occurrence of the hour, that is after the hour has actually started and things are moving, within what is called the hour, as-sa'a, or within the last day. These are the things that are now actually happening, the first of which will be the smoke. So there are different positions on these matters, and that's just an idea. And many scholars do follow what Ibn Hajar Asqalani says or what the other says. So now the first that we have here, the appearance of the Mahdi. Um, the question is he one of the minor signs or one of the major ones? There is difference of opinion on this, whether he's one of the major signs or one of the minor signs. Um, is not clearly mentioned. The hadith do not clearly mention him as one of the minor signs or one of the major signs. So that is why scholars differ on this matter. Um, uh, so it seems that maybe he is like the transition between the minor and major signs. The minor signs come before, and perhaps with the coming of the last of the minor signs, there is that transition into the major signs, and so perhaps he occupies that position of that transition into the major signs, and you will see why. Let me give a short description of things about him. Al-Mahdi, he will appear near the end of time, and that Hadith mentions this right near the end of time, near the end of the Ummah, or the time for of the Ummah, when corruption will be widespread. His name will be Muhammad ibn Abdullah. That is, the Prophet ﷺ says he will have my name, Muhammad, and his father's name will be my father's name, Abdullah. So when this person comes, that is one way to recognize him, that he is Muhammad and his father's name is Abdullah. There have been perhaps a few claimants to the Mahdi, but they don't fit that. Even that they don't fulfill, right? The name, and therefore you can immediately dismiss them, that they are not the correct Mahdi. So from time to time, people have appeared claiming to be the Mahdi, and they are not. We recognize them immediately if the name is different. And he will grow up like any other person, like any ordinary person that is. perhaps doing things like any ordinary person will do, perhaps maybe some wrong things even. And Hadith says that when the time comes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reform him, will make him upright, in other words, and will inspire him to announce himself at the inspire him with this mission that he will have, and he will recognize that he has this mission. He will be reformed. He will then, be that proper Muslim and so on, and he will come forward, announce himself at the Kaaba. Uh, at least one person in history have tried to do that, and he was defeated at the Kaaba. So therefore, he is not that person. He is not the Mahdi. And of course, when he appears and Muslims recognize him, they will take the pledge of allegiance with him, and he will go about his mission, and he will establish justice in the world. So he will be a just ruler, and he will rectify the affairs of the ummah. All of this is mentioned in Hadith, and peace and prosperity will reign in his days, as long as he is the alive and the ruler of the Muslim community, the Ummah. Um, Perhaps you sometimes you will see uh, a different position that the Shia have concerning him, concerning the Mahdi. Uh, there's a long history that they have concerning this matter. They believe also in a Mahdi, but some of their beliefs are wrong, are corrupt, in fact, and not in accordance with the authentic hadith. So, for example, many of the, especially the Ithna Ashariya, the Twelvers, who believe in 12 Imams, they believe that the Mahdi will be a descendant of Al Hussein radiallahu anhu, whereas the authentic hadith say that he will be a descendant of Hassan radiallahu anhu, the elder brother of Hussein. Of course, both of them being sons of Ali and Fatima radiallahu anhuma. So he will be a descendant of Hassan, uh, and so therefore, from that alone, we know that the claim of the Shia will be wrong. Also, they believe that he already came. He was already born many hundreds of years ago, just a few hundred years after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, uh, their 11th Imam was alive. They claimed that he was born from him, but then the soldiers of the Khalifa, who was the Umayyad Khalifa at that time, came, tried to arrest him, tried to arrest the father as well as the son, and they killed the father, whose name is Hassan al-Askari. Hassan al-Askari. Uh, and they did not find the boy. Uh, there was no trace of him actually. They claimed no trace of him, no sign that he was actually born, no sign that his mother was ever pregnant, and so on and so forth, right? So most of our scholars say that it's an entire fabrication. No signs that he was born. When the soldiers came, no, they didn't find anyone. He just disappeared. And his father's name is Hassan. His father's name is not Abdullah. His name is supposed to be the name of the Mahdi, Muhammad ibn Abdullah. And his father's name, according to them, is Hassan al-Askari. Anyhow, we're not going into too much detail. I think this will suffice, except that we have a hadith here عن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله عنه عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال يخرج في آخر أمتي المهدي. The, I think we have the translation. Yeah, we have the translation below. يسقيه الله الغيث وتخرج الأرض نباتها ويعطي المال صحاحا وتكثر الماشية وتعظم الأمة يعيش سبعا أو ثمانية. Uh, in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, in the last days of my ummah, the Mahdi will emerge. Allah will provide him with beneficial rain. The earth will produce its fruits. He will give away wealth without measure. Cattle will be plentiful. The ummah will be great. He will live 7 or 8. I imagine this is 7 or 8 years, maybe ruling as the ummah. This is possibly what it means, 7 or 8 years ruling over the ummah, being the leader of the ummah, inshallah. So, and there's a lot of talk about this these days because of all of the things that have been happening. For perhaps a few decades now, a lot of major events have taken place in the world, major natural disasters as well as man-made disasters and wars and so on and so forth. So a lot of people you have been hearing, maybe saying things on the internet, perhaps in videos and so on, saying that the Mahdi, it is his time now for him to appear, and the Dajjal will appear, and so on. But all of that is just guesswork. There are those who are saying that the Mahdi is already alive. He's already born. He's alive. He is perhaps already mature, ready to make his announcement, and so on and so forth, right? But all of that is just speculation. There is no evidence of any of that, inshallah. And in fact, the evidence points otherwise. Uh, and perhaps we'll see it if we have if when we go through these signs, perhaps especially the Dajjal. Perhaps we can talk some more about that, inshallah. And the Prophet said there's another hadith. There are many hadith about the Mahdi. As I mentioned, his name, uh, who his father's name is, and that he is a descendant of Hassan radiallahu anhu, and so many other descriptions of him. One of the descriptions here is Al Mahdiyu minni, the Mahdi is from me. Ajlal Jabhati, high forehead, Aqnal Anfi, high nose bridge also. Yamla ul Arda Qistan wa Adla, he will fill the earth with goodness and justice. And this is a recurrent theme in many of the hadith about him, that there will be total corruption in the world when he comes, and he will rectify the situation of the ummah as well as the world, and he will fill the earth with goodness and justice. And one hadith also says that, uh, you know, if if the last day of the world star comes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to prolong that day so that the Mahdi can come and do what he has to do, because of course that is something that is ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It will definitely happen. So if it gets very very close to the day of judgment and we see that the Mahdi is not coming, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might prolong the last day so that the Mahdi can come. Let's move on. The second thing is the emergence of Al-Masih al-Dajjal. Now, this is the one that we will have perhaps the most discussion on, and he is the most talked about. This is the most talked about sign these days. For the same reason, with all of these major things happening in the world today, both natural disasters as well as man-made disasters and wars and all sorts of changes occurring and so on. There's a lot of talk about the Dajjal and the appearance of the Dajjal, that his time is now, and so on. Even concerning the war that is currently on, the invasion of the Ukraine by Russia. There are those who are saying that this is mentioned in Hadith. I don't know, because I haven't studied those Hadith, and perhaps one of the minor signs of the Day of Judgment. That war. It could be so. It could be that it is mentioned in the Hadith. But how do we interpret it? How do we understand it? How do we place it in relation to the other signs, the other minor and major signs, and so on? How close it is to the major signs and the coming of the day of judgment and so on. So many questions would be there in one's mind if there is a hadith that mentions this war in the Ukraine. So what we gather from hadith is that the Dajjal is a human, but he will make the claim to be God. The Prophet ﷺ said that there will be like 30 Dajjals who will come, and we have seen some of them who have come already, each one of them claiming to be a prophet. But the last one who comes, the Dajjal al-Masih, he will claim to be God. All of the others claiming prophethood, and he will be the one to claim that he is God. And he will be granted many supernatural powers that sort of proves that he is God. And this will, of course, be a test for people of faith. The people who don't have faith in the first place, who don't have Iman, of course, they will not recognize these things and they will not recognize him, the Dajjal, as the Dajjal, and so on. And so they will be seeing all of these miraculous things, supernatural things that he will be doing, and they will be following him. The Now he is called in the Hadith Al-Masih al-Dajjal, Al-Masih al-Dajjal, Al-Masih al-Dajjal. And for short, we say Dajjal. So in many Hadith and in discussions of the scholars and so on, they just refer to him as a Dajjal, but the complete term is Al-Masih al-Dajjal. It is the false Messiah, Al-Masih, the Messiah, and Dajjal means, uh, let us go down a little bit, where it means the Dajjal, the word Dajjal here, if you can see that, means liar, impostor, deceiver. Al-Masih al-Dajjal, the Messiah who is the false one, who is false, or the Antichrist, as in English, and Christians are expecting him to come also and do a lot of corruption in the world. Perhaps there are some differences in the way they conceive of him and the way that we have him in the hadith. The word, just a brief discussion on these words, al-Masih and ad-Dajjal. The name al-Masih, Masih, is derived from the word masaha, which means to wipe. And perhaps you know the term masah, when you make masah on your socks or the leather socks and so on. It can be, of course, it is permissible to make masah on the ordinary socks also. Uh, but that's a matter of fiqh. It's a different matter. Masaha means to wipe. So why is the word primarily was given to Isa alayhi salam as a title. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it in relation to Isa alayhi salam, Al-Masih. He is Al-Masih. Why is he called Al-Masih? One explanation, there are two basic explanations. Uh, and I think it's probably the same in Hebrew also. And so in the Bible, you have the Messiah mentioned, and the Jews are still looking forward for the Messiah to come, Al-Masih. So how do they understand the term? Being similar in both Hebrew and Arabic, that is the meaning. So one is wiping. So anointing, like when you wipe somebody with oil, masaha. And the kings and important people, perhaps other important people, used to be anointed when they are crowned as king in the olden days, and so they are anointed. They are masih. And the Bible uses the word masih for many different individuals, including Dawood alayhi salam. He is masih, and many others. That's a different study by itself. Disproves a lot of things that the Christians claim. What is there in the Bible? They consider this term al-Masih to be exclusive for Isa alayhi salam, a term that implies for them godhood, that he is God, and so on. So as I said, that's a different matter. We won't go into that into detail, but it's It's an interesting study by itself. So Masih means the one who is anointed. How is Isa alayhi salam anointed? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose him. And again, there could be a lot of discussion surrounding that. The other meaning is also applicable to him, and the Jews also have the same meaning in their when for the Messiah that they're looking forward to. Masih could indicate, the wiping of the earth. Actually, I have that. I have that. We'll come back to it when we discuss when we come to that point. Wiping of the earth. Here it doesn't mean actual wiping. What it means to say is traversing the earth. And because Al-Masih, that is Isa alayhi salam, was known for, traveling, his traveling, not being in one place, not being stationary. He was always on the move. So he is called Al-Masih. So both meanings are applicable to him, that he is anointed or that he is one who travels frequently. Uh, Now, in relation to the Dajjal, why is the Dajjal called Al-Masih? Uh, both Can both meanings apply to him? Allahu alam. One of the things that scholars point out in relation to the Dajjal is that the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Dajjalu mamsuh al-ain. Mamsuh al-ain. Mamsuh from the same root, actually meaning the same thing perhaps. The Dajjal's eye is wiped or wiped out. When you say wipe out, something is wiped out, it means it doesn't exist. It is deformed, it is not functioning. It is not functioning. So that's what it means. Doesn't mean to say that he has only one eye, but that one eye is defective. It is not, it is not working. It is not functioning at all. Um, so Mamsuh al-Ain, and maybe because of that, he is called Al-Masih. Uh, The other meaning could be that because he will travel the entire earth. The hadith says that there will be no city which he will not enter into except for Mecca and Medina. Uh, I think I will have a hadith mentioning that. So all of these things, and there are many hadith concerning the Dajjal. We can't, of course, go into all of them, but this is just a few of them to get for us to get a clear understanding of who he is. Now the hadith says, one hadith says, "Ma bayna khalqi Adam ila qiyam as-sa'a khalqun akbaru min ad-Dajjal." Between the creation of Adam and the start of the hour, there will be no trial greater than that of the Dajjal. Actually, the word trial is not here. The word khalqun, creation, there is no creation bigger or greater than the Dajjal. But there is also the hadith that indicates that there will be no trial that is greater than that of the Dajjal. So just imagine the greatest trial for mankind, the greatest trial and tribulation and fitna. Maybe the word fitna is mentioned in the other hadith. The greatest fitna that will occur to mankind will be the coming of the Dajjal. So that's something terrible, and that is something that you don't want to face. In fact, that is something that you do not want to be alive at the time when it happens, when the Dajjal comes. It is so bad. It will be so bad. So many people will be deceived by him. And I think this one with these letters written on his forehead, kafara, meaning kafir, this one is perhaps one of the most famous hadith about the Dajjal. So all believers will see that, they will be able to read it, whether they are literate or not. An indication that the disbelievers will not recognize that, will not see that, and they will not recognize him to be a kafir, a disbeliever. They will think either that he is God or some great individual who will, lead them to salvation or something like that. He will have heaven and hell with him. And if you enter into what he calls heaven, it will be hell. And if you enter into what he calls hell, that will be heaven, and so on and so forth, right? So a lot of people will be deceived by him. He will remain on the earth for 40 days, one day like a year, one day like a month, and one day like a week. The remaining days will be like the ordinary days. He will travel like the cloud that is pushed by wind. He will enter into every city, as I mentioned, except for Mecca and Medina, which are guarded by angels. And before we mention this last point about him, this traveling of his, there is hadith that actually describes the vehicle that he will be using, the donkey that he will be riding on. I don't have it with me, but it describes the huge ears that this donkey will have and how broad, it will be. And I saw also a description that says that it will be so big. This donkey will be so big that it can carry people within it, within or inside of it. People can be there. People might be there. So people might be traveling with this Masih ad-Dajjal wherever he goes. And because of this hadith and because of similar other hadith like this, there are those, Muslims, who dismiss this all and say that all of this is fiction, all of this is fabrication. There is no Dajjal who will come. All of this is fantastic and beyond imagination and so on, right? Uh, but when we consider it, maybe the Prophet ﷺ is not speaking literally when he says donkey, the donkey that the Dajjal will be traveling in, that will take him to all parts of the world, every city of the world, and he will be able to enter them except for Mecca and Medina. This beast, this donkey with two large ears, and that can hold people inside, is very much like the airplane today. So the Prophet ﷺ could not have mentioned an airplane. People would not have understood. Maybe people would have started to disbelieve in him immediately. What kind of thing are you mentioning? Well, anyhow, and there are other things like that that are more understandable in this day and age with the advance of technology, and with the invention of all of these different modes of transportation and different things, and how one is able to travel so fast. If he is here on Earth only for 40 days, how can he go to all cities, all places? Maybe it's a much advanced time than ours, where travel will be much faster than it is now. As you see, people are trying in these days to develop the ability to travel, at a much faster speed. I saw a description, and again, I'm not sure if that is authentic or not, but one description is saying that he is fat and round. This animal, this donkey, fat and round. Now, if this donkey is fat and round and is able to travel at tremendous speeds, maybe faster than the speed of light, or just like the speed of light, or something like that, Allahu Alam. Uh, the source that I saw it from, I can't rely on the source, but he was comparing it to flying saucers. Of course, we know that that has been a talk that is around for so many years. These UFOs. So the last hadith that I have here, and there are perhaps dozens and dozens of a hadith concerning the Dajjal. There are some of them that are weak, some of them perhaps fabricated, but there are also sahih, authentic hadith concerning the Dajjal. So all of those who reject the concept of the Dajjal as being false, they are wrong. They are rejecting authentic hadith. And of course, that only comes from people who reject hadith. Those who reject the concept of the Dajjal, they are rejecting authentic hadith. And we know that there are groups of Muslims like that who reject all ahadith. So that is expected. Of course, it is not proper for Muslims to do that, to reject authentic hadith. Now, this hadith here says, يَقْتُلُ ابْنُ مَرْيَمَ الدَّجَّالَ بِبَابِلُدْ. Ibn Maryam, the son of Maryam, alayhim salam, will kill the Dajjal at the port of Lud. Bab Lud. Bab means a gate. It means a door. It is used for a port, like a seaport, an airport, and so on. And there is the place in Palestine, well, in present-day Israel, that is called Lydia. That has been the name, of course, from ancient times, and it has an airport there. So Isa alayhi salam most likely will kill him at that point. Perhaps when he is trying to run away from Isa alayhi salam using an airport. It could be probably developed much more than an airport by the time it occurs. That is, with the presence of when the Dajjal actually comes and so on. It may be far advanced than our times, and so the port of Lud might not just be an airport. It might be a port with flying saucers, you know, uh, these modes of transportation that are faster than airplanes and so on. Allahu alam. So there's a lot that can be discussed concerning this. One thing, a couple of hadith, I mean, so that I have not quoted here, but you need to be aware of. There are those who are talking about the appearance of the Dajjal in these days. All of the signs, they are saying all of the signs are there, and this is the time when he will appear. Just look out for him; he is about to come, and so on. And those who describe this time as the time of the Dajjal, all of these major things that are happening, not just the disasters and so on, but the way the world has become corrupt and so on, all of these are signs of the Dajjal. This is the Dajjal, the age of the Dajjal, so he will appear and so on. The hadith, authentic hadith, indicate, a number of things. One of them is that he will try to enter into Palestine. He will come from outside of Palestine, right? And he will try to enter into Jerusalem and so on. The hadith doesn't say that he will be debarred from Jerusalem. It says he will be debarred by angels from entering Mecca and Medina. So will he enter? Very, very likely he will enter Jerusalem also. Um, uh, the hadith indicate that there will be no Jews at that time in Jerusalem. And this is, if we consider this situation now, it seems strange with the state of Israel being there. It means that has to be gone before the Dajjal appears. So all of the scholars who have studied the hadith and so on, they say that the Dajjal will come at a time when Israel has gone out of existence, and the Jews will not be living in Jerusalem and the surrounding areas anymore. This is an important fact. And there is also another hadith that says that the Dajjal will come at a time when the khatibs are not speaking about him anymore. The khatibs, that means like on Jumu'ah, the day of Friday, when they are giving the khutbahs and so on, right? Nobody will be speaking about the Dajjal. He will come at that time. When we look at these things, we see that clearly this is not the time for the Dajjal to appear. Let's continue. The descent of Isa alayhi salam, there are a number of hadith concerning Isa alayhi salam. We can't mention them all. He will descend and he will kill the Dajjal. As mentioned previously, he will confront him at Bab al-Lud in Lydia, and he will kill him. The details about these matters in a hadith, which we're not going into. He will remain for 40 years, and during that time, he will fill the earth with justice and peace. So it looks like he will take over. He will come when the Mahdi is actually here, right? The Dajjal will come when the Mahdi is here, or the Dajjal will come first, and then the Mahdi will come with. It seems that well, the Dajjal is actually one of the major signs, whereas there's a difference of opinion, as I mentioned, about whether the Mahdi is one of the major signs or not. So it seems that the Mahdi will come, at the end of that period of the minor signs, and then the one of the first major signs that will appear is the coming of the Dajjal, and that will be in the lifetime of the Al Mahdi. And while the Mahdi will confront him, there will be fighting and so on. The Mahdi will not have any authority over the Dajjal. He is not the one to kill the Dajjal. The Isa alayhi salam will come, as mentioned in Hadith. Isa alayhi salam will descend on the white minaret in Damascus, on a white minaret in Damascus, and this is where the Mahdi and his followers will be. A small amount of people, Muslims, with him, and they will come out for Fajr, and they will see Isa alayhi salam. They will recognize him, and the Mahdi will invite him to lead the Salah, but he will decline, and he says that this is not, the Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is from one of them should lead the Salah, and so the Mahdi, is the one who has the rightful place to lead the Salah. He will do that, and then Isa alayhi salam will proceed with his mission of going after the Dajjal, eventually killing him, and destroying the cross and killing the swine and so on and so forth, putting an end to Christianity almost. There is a question about whether Christian there will still be Christians when he comes and after he comes until the day of judgment. The Quran actually indicates that there will still be Christians. Perhaps there are those who will not accept him as Isa because this is not the Messiah that they were expecting. So it is possible that there will be Christians who still do not accept him, even after he comes. They will still not accept him, and they will continue with their false beliefs until the day of judgment. But they will be minor, just a small amount of them. So Allahu Alam, there's a lot of things that we cannot discuss fully here, looking at all of the hadith and all of the evidence for or against any question that you may have in your mind. So the Mahdi will not, he will be gone. Isa alayhi salam will be the one to kill the Dajjal, and Isa alayhi salam will reign for that period, and the earth will be filled with justice and peace and so on. And wealth will flow during his time. Then there will be the emergence of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. They will emerge in the time of Isa alayhi salam, and nobody will be said this. This is one of the great fitnas also, of course, one of the major signs of Qiyamah. Nobody will be safe from them, except those who hide in fortresses and secure places and so on. And that will be including Isa alayhi salam and the believers with him. Isa alayhi salam will make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and plead with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to destroy this fitna of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send worms that will eat their necks, and they will die, and their bodies will be strewn all over the earth. And of course, nobody will venture out from their secure places and try to remove these bodies and so on. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send birds that will pick up these bodies and throw them wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, dispose of them, and then the earth will be cleansed of them and their blood and so on and so forth. Right? There's a lot of discussion also concerning Ya'juj and Ma'juj and the emergence of them. The Surah Al-Kahf speaks about Ya'juj and Ma'juj. in the time of that righteous person who will traverse the earth, who will go from the east, to the easternmost part, to the rising of the sun and setting of the sun, go and the setting of the sun to the extremes of the earth. If I hope who went, not who will, but who did in the past, whoever he is, Allahu Alam. But he did that, and he met some people who asked him to save tribe, who asked him to save them from Ya'juj and Ma'juj. In Ya'juj wa Ma'juj mufsiduna fil ard. That is what they told him, that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are causing corruption in the world, and so on. Please protect us from them. And he will build a dam. There's so many things about this dam and the destruction of the dam and the emergence of Ya'juj and Ma'juj and so on. We don't have the time to go into all of that, right? But yeah, so this will be the end of them. Nobody will have the power to, fight against them. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala will send these worms that eat them from the necks. They will die, and the bodies will be left there all over the earth until Allah Subhanahu wa Taala disposes of them. Then there is the destruction of the Kaaba, and this will be at the hands of an Abyssinian man. There's a hadith here that says the Kaaba will be destroyed by Dhu as-Suwayqatain. As-Suwayqatain means the small legs, the one with the two small legs. And this is because his legs will be small. He will have small, not really proportioned to his body from Abyssinia. Then there will be the smoke, a dukhan, and this smoke will emerge and will cover everyone. How it will happen, so we don't have the time to go into it. And in fact, maybe we don't know much about it. Allahu Alam, how it will appear and cover the entire earth and so on. It will affect the believers like a flu or something minor, but will have a greater effect upon the disbelievers. So it will be a greater disaster for disbelievers. How is it that Allah, if it is something physical, we know that we're all affected when there is a flu, there is a virus or so. It affects everyone, believers and disbelievers. But this smoke, it will affect uh, while it will affect the believers, it will be a minor form of sickness and so on. Whereas for disbelievers, it will be a major form of sickness. The rising of the sun from the west. This is one of the hadith that is famous also, one of the signs that is famous, and people talk about it a lot. Um, when this happens, a person who did not have Iman, this is the important point from it. When this happens, when the sun rises from the west, a person who did not have Iman before will not benefit from accepting Iman then. His Iman will not be accepted, in fact. If he becomes a believer at that time, his Iman will not be accepted at that time. Nor will a person benefit if he had Iman but he did not do good with his Iman. He did not earn good deeds and so on. With his Iman, he will not be able to earn good deeds at that time with the coming of or the rising of the sun from the west. So that's a scary proposition. Nobody's Iman will be accepted. Nobody will be able to do good if they had Iman before that and they did not utilize it to do good. Emergence of a beast from the earth that will speak to the people. This beast will scold people and tell them that they were not having Iman, they were not believing. Why were you not? Maybe scolding them and so on. And a person's Iman will not be accepted then if he did not have Iman, just like the one before it. Will the two signs come together? Will they come one after another? Allahu Alam. But concerning the emergence of this beast from the earth also, yeah, the, the same description of what will happen, that is, a person who did not have Iman, whether he believes at that time or not will be immaterial. His Iman will not be accepted at that time. Or if a person had Iman and did not benefit from his iman, he will not be able to benefit now with the emergence of this beast. Again, there's a lot of speculation about what this beast is. Is it a real living creature, or is it perhaps like the donkey of the Dajjal? And we know that there are the robots and so on that can speak these days. Allahu A'lam. Allah knows best what it will be. There will be three earthquakes, one in the east, another in the west, and a third in the Arabian Peninsula. Of course, these are major earthquakes. And then there will be the blowing of a cold wind. When this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send this wind that will take the lives of all believers. We know that now we are coming to the end. We're coming very, very close to the beginning of the day of judgment. It will take the life of all of the believers, even if they're, hadith says, even if they're in a cave or in a mountain, wherever they're trying, they happen to be at that time. No matter how secure that place is, that wind, that cold wind, is going to come into it, and it will take their lives. When they die, only evil people will remain on earth, and then the hour will be established. The hour will now be there, actually there. This is the time when Qiyamah is actually starting. And then finally, the scholars have agreed that the emergence of a fire, this is the last of all of the major signs. It will appear from Yemen, and it will drive the people to the place of resurrection, which is Sham. Now, what is Sham? Sham is that huge area that includes Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, that entire area. Uh, so people will be driven to that place by this fire, and the hadith say that wherever they go, wherever they spend the night, the fire will be with them. So they have no option but to move on until they reach Sham, the place of resurrection. So that is the last of all the scholars agree that that is the last of the major signs, and that is when now resurrection will actually start. So we come to an end. All of this is very, very brief. Are there any questions? We just have a few minutes remaining.
Questions will come.
So if Imtiaz is there, back over to you. Let's see if there are any questions.
Well, alhamdulillah, it seems as though our listeners are more content with listening from how, but which coinciding with our time running out. But I'm sure questions will come from this as brothers and sisters, go over it and look it over, and so many questions can pop up. Um, so we'll take this opportunity, therefore, to close off. We thank Shaykh Raouf for his captivating presentation. Before concluding, I have three important announcements from what I am to remind you of. Um, First, tomorrow is tax time. Brother Safraz Muhid and Brother Asnad Rahman CPA and Brother Safraz tax accountant, well qualified brothers in the arena of tax, will be hosting a workshop on presentation. It is tomorrow, Sunday, March the 6th at 6 p.m. As the flyer you can see on the screen is indicating, join us live online for a free tax presentation by qualified professionals, learn filing instructions, requirements, and new changes for the 2022 tax year. And watch live at As-Siddiq.org webinar. The second announcement is on the topic of reconnecting with the Qur'an, the pre-Ramadan program, which will occur next week, Saturday, March 12th at 6 p.m. Speakers Sheikh Nazim Habibullah and Maulana Farzan Muhammad, who is the Assistant Imam of Masjid As-Siddiq. You and your family are invited to our in-person and online pre-Ramadan program, where we will focus on reconnecting with the Quran during the holy month of Ramadan. So a good prelude for the glorious month of Ramadan. And last announcement relates to the Sisters Janazah workshop, which will occur on March 20th this year, at 1:30 p.m. at Masjid Siddiq. And good reminders, speakers will be Brother Irshad Ibrahim and Idris, Sister Idris, and all sisters are welcome to join us for an informative Janazah workshop at Masjid As-Siddiq, where we will be covering various topics, which include legal aspects, the last moments of dying, shrouding, etiquettes for women, very important subtopics on this important workshop. Don't miss it, inshallah. With that, we will close off. Please join us again in the month of May. Of course, Ramadan is April. For the next interesting Tafseer session by Imam Raouf, inshallah. And please continue to stay safe and healthy. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.